The awakening of the Retribution. A massive human dreadnought, as ancient as it was deadly, stirred from its thousand-year slumber. The ISS Retribution, a relic from the once mighty human imperium, now long collapsed and faded to myth, powered up its systems. Its advanced plasma cannons and graviton torpedoes blazed to life, ready to unleash hell upon the galaxy. For centuries, the Retribution had drifted derelict, its crew long dead, waiting for the day when it would once again be needed to defend humanity. That day had come, for the galaxy was now ruled by the cruel Zork Confederacy. In the year 2845 AD, the Zorks had crushed or assimilated countless alien races in their lust for power. Hundreds of Zork warships, led by the ruthless Captain Zakar, entered the Theta Centauri system, intent on adding it to their empire. But the Zorks were not alone. As their fleet approached the system, they encountered the ancient human dreadnought, its massive silhouette emerging from the void like a specter from the past. Zakar, sensing an opportunity to uncover the secrets of this powerful vessel, ordered his troops to board the Retribution and capture it. The Zork soldiers found a frozen human man inside, surrounded by strange machines. Lieutenant Krolek, Zakar's chief science officer, brought the human and the ship's technology back to the Zork flagship, eager to study them. The Retribution, to all outward appearances, seemed lifeless and abandoned. But deep within its systems, something stirred. The human ship's advanced artificial intelligence, dormant for centuries, sensed the Zork presence and began to awaken. As the Zork fleet departed the system, leaving the Retribution seemingly unattended, death itself began to stir. The ancient vessel's systems powered up, its weapons coming online. The human ship had been roused from its slumber, and it had a score to settle. Admiral Jackson Wrecker's eyes fluttered open as the stasis pod hissed and released its seal. He tried to move, but found his arms and legs bound by thick metal restraints. Two burly Zork guards yanked him from the pod, their clawed hands digging into his flesh. "On your feet, human scum," one of the guards growled, shoving Wrecker forward. The Admiral stumbled, his muscles weak from centuries of disuse, but he managed to stay upright. He looked around, taking in the alien architecture of the ship, the harsh fluorescent lighting, and the leering faces of his captors. The guards led Wrecker into a small, dimly lit room where a tall, imposing Zork with ornate insignia on his uniform waited, flanked by two smaller aliens in lab coats. "I am Captain Zakar of the Zork Confederacy," the tall alien said, his voice cold and imperious. "You will answer my questions, human, or suffer the consequences." Wrecker met Zakar's gaze, his blue eyes blazing with defiance. "I am Admiral Jackson Wrecker of the Human Imperium," he said, his voice hoarse from centuries of silence. "I answer to no one, least of all a Zork." Zakar's eyes narrowed, and he nodded to one of the guards, who slammed his fist into Wrecker's stomach, doubling him over. "You will tell us the secrets of your technology," Zakar hissed. "The weapons, the shields, the engines, everything. And you will tell us where we can find more of your kind." Wrecker spat blood onto the floor and grinned up at Zakar, his teeth stained red. "Out of luck, Zork. I'm the last of my kind. The human Imperium is gone, destroyed centuries ago. And as for my ship, you'll never unlock its secrets. The Retribution is beyond your comprehension." Zakar backhanded Wrecker across the face, splitting his lip. "We shall see about that, human," he growled. "My engineers are already studying your vessel. It's only a matter of time before we crack its codes and make its power our own." Wrecker laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Good luck with that. The Retribution is the most advanced warship ever built by human hands. It was designed to take on entire fleets single-handedly. It's the crown jewel of the Dreadnought Corps, the elite warriors of the human Imperium, and I'm the last of them." Zakar leaned in close, his fetid breath hot on Wrecker's face. "Then you will watch as we tear your precious ship apart, piece by piece, until we have what we want. And then, "Admiral, I will take great pleasure in personally ending your miserable life." Wrecker met Zakar's gaze unflinchingly. "You can try, Zork, but you have no idea what you're up against. The Retribution isn't just a ship. It's a weapon, a tool of vengeance, and it will stop at nothing to see every last Zork in the galaxy dead at its feet." Zakar snarled and turned to his guards. "Take him back to his cell. We'll see how defiant he is after a few days without food or water." As the guards dragged Wrecker away, Zakar turned to his science officers. "Double your efforts on that ship. I want its secrets, and I want them now. The Zork Confederacy will not be denied its prize." The officers nodded and scurried away, leaving Zakar alone in the room, seething with rage and anticipation. The human ship would be his, and with it, the galaxy would tremble before the might of the Zorks. Wrecker's daring escape. Alone in his cell, Admiral Wrecker's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan to escape the Zork ship and retake the Retribution. He knew that the ship's advanced technology was his only hope of defeating the Zorks and avenging the fall of the human Imperium. Wrecker closed his eyes and focused, drawing on his intimate knowledge of the Retribution systems. He visualized the ship's computer network, the intricate web of circuits and data pathways that controlled every aspect of the vessel's operation. With a deep breath, Wrecker reached out with his mind, using the neural implant that connected him to the Retribution's air. He could feel the presence of the Zork ship's computer, an alien and hostile entity that sought to keep him imprisoned. But Wrecker was not one to be easily contained. With a surge of mental energy, he launched a devastating cyber attack on the Zork's computer, exploiting weaknesses and vulnerabilities that only someone with his level of expertise could perceive. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems began to fail, one by one. Lights flickered and went out, plunging the vessel into darkness. Doors slammed shut, trapping Zork crew members in their quarters. In the chaos, Wrecker made his move. He grabbed the guard outside his cell and slammed him against the wall, knocking him unconscious with a brutal headbutt. He took the guard's weapon, a sleek plasma rifle, and checked the charge, full power. Wrecker kicked open the cell door and stepped out into the corridor, his senses on high alert. He could hear the sound of running footsteps and shouted commands as the Zork crew scrambled to respond to the emergency. But Wrecker was already on the move, his combat training kicking in as he navigated the twisting corridors of the ship. He encountered a group of Zork soldiers, their weapons drawn and ready to fire. Wrecker didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee and fired off a rapid burst of plasma bolts, taking down 3 of the soldiers before they could react. The 4th managed to get off a shot, but Wrecker rolled to the side and came up firing, hitting the Zork square in the chest. Wrecker continued his relentless advance, cutting down Zork soldiers left and right as he made his way towards the hangar bay where the Retribution was being held. The ship's computer was still in chaos, with systems failing and alarms blaring, but Wrecker's implant allowed him to navigate the confusion with ease. Finally, he reached the hangar bay doors. He could hear the sound of weapons fire and shouted commands from the other side. Captain Zakar and his elite guard, no doubt, preparing to make their final stand. Wrecker gripped his plasma rifle tightly and took a deep breath. Then, with a roar of defiance, he kicked open the doors and charged into the hangar bay, firing off a barrage of plasma bolts as he went. The Zork soldiers were caught off guard by the ferocity of Wrecker's attack. They returned fire, but their shots went wide as they struggled to get a bead on the fast-moving human. Wrecker used the Retribution's advanced targeting system to pick off the Zork soldiers one by one, his plasma rifle flashing as he fired off shot after shot. The hangar bay echoed with the sound of weapons fire and the screams of dying Zorks. Captain Zakar, seeing his soldiers falling like dominoes, let out a roar of rage and charged at Wrecker, his plasma sword blazing with deadly energy. Wrecker met the charge head-on, dropping his rifle and drawing his own plasma sword from a hidden sheath on his back. The two warriors clashed in a flurry of sparks and flashing blades, their swords moving faster than the eye could follow. Zakar was a skilled fighter, his every move calculated and precise, but Riker was a master of the blade. His centuries of combat experience gave him an edge that the Zork captain could not match. They traded blows back and forth, their swords clashing and sizzling with each impact. Wrecker could feel the heat of the plasma blades on his skin, could smell the ozone tang of ionized air, but he refused to yield, refused to give in to the exhaustion and pain that threatened to overwhelm him. With a final desperate lunge, he slipped past Zakar's guard and drove his plasma sword deep into the Zork's chest. Zakar's eyes widened in shock and pain as he looked down at the glowing blade that protruded from his chest. He let out a gurgling cry and collapsed to the deck, his sword clattering to the ground beside him. Wrecker stood over the fallen Zork captain, his chest heaving with exertion. He looked around the hangar bay, taking in the sight of the dead Zork soldiers and the smoking wreckage of their weapons. Then, with a grim smile, he turned and strode towards the Retribution, his ship, his home. It was time to bring the vengeance of the human Imperium to the Zork Confederacy, and the galaxy would tremble before the might of the Retribution once more. The Retribution's rampage. As Admiral Wrecker settled into the command chair of the Retribution, the ship thrummed with power beneath his feet. Consoles blinked to life, displays flickering as the vessel's systems came online one by one. The bridge was bathed in the soft glow of holographic readouts and the gentle hum of the ship's reactor. Ricker's fingers danced across the controls, his mind linked with the ship's computer through his neural implant. He could feel the Retribution's strength, the coiled power waiting to be unleashed upon the Zorks. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the bridge. Ricker's eyes snapped to the communications display, where a distress signal pulsed with urgent intensity. He tapped the screen, and a garbled voice filled the air. "This is a human colony under attack. Urgent need for assistance. The Zorks are attacking." Ricker's jaw clenched. A human colony, out here in the depths of space, under attack by the Zorks. He had to act fast. Helm, set a course for the origin of that distress signal. "Maximum speed," Riker ordered. The Retribution's engines roared to life, propelling the massive ship forward with breathtaking acceleration. Stars streaked past the viewports as the vessel hurtled through the void, closing in on the besieged colony with each passing second. As the Retribution dropped out of hyperspace on the outskirts of the system, Ricker's eyes widened in horror at the sight before him. A Zork Armada, dozens of ships strong, hung in orbit around the planet like a swarm of angry hornets. Plasma fire rained down on the surface, the bright flashes of explosions visible even from this distance. Ricker's hands clenched into fists. The colony's defenses were crumbling, their ships no match for the Zork's superior numbers and technology. They wouldn't last much longer without help. "All hands, battle stations. Prepare for combat," Riker barked. The Retribution's crew sprang into action, manning their posts with grim determination. Riker could feel the ship's weapon systems coming online, the hum of power building within the vessel's frame. "Zakar's fleet, this is Admiral Jackson Riker of the ISS Retribution. Cease your attack on the human colony immediately, or face the consequences," Riker said, his voice echoing across the communication channels. There was a moment of silence, then a sneering voice filled the comm channel. "Ah, the infamous Admiral Riker. I was wondering when you would show up to defend your pathetic little colony," the Zork commander said. Riker's eyes narrowed. "I won't ask again, Zork. Stand down or be destroyed." The Zork commander laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're outnumbered and outgunned, human. You really think you can take on my entire fleet with that antique you call a ship?" Riker smiled coldly. "I guess we'll find out, won't we?" With a thought, he brought the Retribution's weapons to bear on the nearest Zork ship. A massive plasma beam lanced out from the human vessel's forward batteries, piercing the Zork's shields as if they were made of paper. The enemy ship exploded in a brilliant fireball, debris spinning off into space. The Zork fleet reacted with predictable outrage, turning their weapons on the Retribution with furious intensity. But Reeker was already moving, the human ship darting and weaving through the storm of plasma fire with impossible grace for a vessel of its size. Graviton torpedoes and antimatter missiles streaked from the Retribution's launch bays, seeking out Zork ships with unerring accuracy. The void lit up with the flashes of exploding vessels, the Zork's Armada crumbling under the relentless onslaught. Wrecker's hands flew over the controls, his mind linked with the ship's targeting systems. He could see the enemy's weaknesses, the chinks in their armor, and he exploited them mercilessly. The Retribution danced through the battle like a lethal ballerina, leaving a trail of shattered Zork ships in its wake. On the planet's surface, the human colonists watched in awe as the Retribution tore through the Zork fleet. They cheered as each enemy ship exploded, hope surging through their hearts as they realized that they might just survive this nightmare after all. The Zork commander, his voice tight with barely controlled rage, ordered his remaining ships to retreat. But Reeker was having none of it. The Retribution pursued the fleeing Zork vessels, picking them off one by one with ruthless efficiency. By the time the last Zork ship exploded into a cloud of debris, the once mighty Armada was reduced to nothing more than a field of shattered wreckage drifting in the void. Reeker sat back in his command chair, a grim smile on his face. The Retribution had proven its worth today, and the human colonists were safe, at least for now. But he knew that this was only the beginning. The Zorks would not take this defeat lightly, and they would be back with even greater numbers and firepower. And when they did, Admiral Wrecker and the Retribution would be ready for them. Forging an alliance, the Retribution touched down on the planet's surface with a gentle thud, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris as its landing gear settled into the scorched earth. Admiral Wrecker emerged from the ship's airlock, his boots crunching on the rocky ground as he surveyed the scene before him. The human colony was in ruins, its buildings shattered and burning from the Zork bombardment. But amidst the destruction, a crowd of survivors had gathered, their faces filled with a mixture of awe and relief as they beheld their savior. A woman pushed her way through the throng, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank the stars you arrived when you did," she cried. "We thought we were done for." Wrecker nodded grimly. "I'm just glad we got here in time. What's the situation on the ground?" The woman's face fell. "It's bad, sir. The Zorks hit us hard. We've got wounded, and our supplies are running low, but we're not beaten yet." Wrecker clapped a hand on the woman's shoulder. "And you won't be, not as long as I have anything to say about it. We'll get your people the help they need." As Wrecker moved through the crowd, a figure caught his eye. A woman, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, watching him intently, her gaze sharp and appraising. Wrecker approached her. "I don't believe we've met. Admiral Jackson Wrecker, at your service." The woman nodded. "Dr. Aravos, I've heard a great deal about you, Admiral. Your reputation precedes you." Wrecker raised an eyebrow. "Oh, good things, I hope." Dr. Aravos smiled thinly. "Mostly, but I'm more interested in your ship, the Retribution. I've never seen anything like it." Wrecker's eyes narrowed. "The Retribution is one of a kind, and I'm afraid I can't discuss its capabilities with civilians." Dr. Aravos leaned in closer, her voice low. "I'm no ordinary civilian, Admiral. I'm a scientist, and I've been working on something that could change the course of this war. But I need your help to make it a reality." Wrecker's interest was piqued. "What kind of something?" Dr. Aravos glanced around, making sure no one was within earshot. "A weapon, Admiral. One that could give us the edge we need against the Zorks. But I need access to your ship's technology to make it work." Wrecker considered for a moment. The Retribution's secrets were closely guarded, known only to a select few within the Dreadnought Corps. But if Dr. Aravos was telling the truth, her weapon could be the key to humanity's survival. "All right, Doctor," Wrecker said at last. "You've got my attention, but I'll need to know more before I agree to anything." Dr. Aravos nodded. "Of course, "Admiral, come with me to my lab, and I'll show you everything." As Wrecker followed Dr. Aravos through the ruined streets of the colony, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the cusp of something momentous. The Zorks had been terrorizing humanity for far too long, and it was time to take the fight to them. In Dr. Aravos's lab, a cramped, cluttered space filled with humming machinery and flickering holographic displays, Wrecker listened intently as the scientist outlined her plan. "The weapon I've been developing is a new type of plasma cannon," Dr. Aravos explained, bringing up a schematic on one of the displays. "It's based on the same principles as the Retribution's main guns, but with a few key modifications." Wrecker studied the schematic, his brow furrowed. "What kind of modifications?" Dr. Aravos grinned. "For starters, a new type of plasma containment field that allows for a much higher energy output and a targeting system that can lock onto Zork ships even through their jamming fields." Wrecker whistled softly. "Impressive. But what do you need from me?" Dr. Aravos leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Your ship, Admiral. The Retribution's power core is the only thing in the galaxy that can generate enough energy to power my weapon. If we can integrate it into your ship's systems, we'll have a dreadnought that the Zorks won't be able to touch." Wrecker nodded slowly, his mind racing with the possibilities. With Dr. Aravos's weapon, the Retribution would be more than just a symbol of human defiance. It would be a true instrument of war, capable of taking on the Zork fleet and winning. "All right, Doctor," Wrecker said at last. "And you've got a deal. Let's get to work." Over the next few days, Dr. Aravos and her team worked tirelessly to integrate her plasma cannon into the Retribution's weapon systems. Wrecker watched in amazement as the scientist worked her magic, her hands flying over the ship's controls as she fine-tuned the targeting algorithms and power distribution networks. As word of Admiral Wrecker's victory over the Zorks spread throughout the human colonies, more and more ships began to arrive at the planet, their crews eager to join the fight. Wrecker welcomed them all, knowing that every ship, no matter how small or outdated, would be needed in the battles to come. With Dr. Aravos's help, Wrecker began to assemble his fleet, hand-picking the most skilled pilots and warriors from among the volunteers. They were a ragtag bunch, their ships a mismatched collection of freighters, fighters, and salvage Zork vessels, but they were united in their determination to take back what was rightfully theirs, to make the Zorks pay for every human life they had taken. As the fleet grew in size and strength, Wrecker could feel the tide beginning to turn. The Zorks may have had the advantage in numbers and technology, but humanity had something they could never match: the will to survive and the courage to fight for their freedom. And with the Retribution at the head of the fleet, its new plasma cannon glowing with barely contained power, Wrecker knew that the Zorks' days were numbered. The galaxy would soon learn the true meaning of human defiance, and the Zorks would rue the day they ever dared to challenge the last of the Dreadnought Corps. The terminus device. Sparks flew from consoles, alarms blared, and the acrid stench of burning circuitry filled the bridge of the Retribution. Admiral Wrecker gripped the armrests of his command chair, his knuckles white, as he watched the holographic display flicker and waver. "Damage report," he barked. Commander Thorne, Wrecker's grizzled executive officer, called out from his station. "Shields at 30%, hull breaches on decks 7 and 12. Weapon systems still online, but the new plasma cannons are overheating. We can't sustain this rate of fire for much longer." Wrecker clenched his jaw as the Retribution shuddered under another barrage of Zork plasma fire. On the view screen, the massive bulk of a Zork dreadnought loomed, its weapons glowing hellishly as it prepared another salvo. "Admiral, we can't take another hit like that," Dr. Aravos warned from her station at the science console, her face pale, but her voice remained steady. "If we don't do something soon, we're finished." Wrecker stared at the Zork ship, his mind racing. They were outgunned and outmatched, their shields failing, their weapons overheating. But he refused to give up, refused to let the Zorks win. Not when there were human lives at stake. "Helm, set a collision course with that dreadnought," he ordered. Divert all power to shields and structural integrity fields. There was a moment of stunned silence on the bridge. Then Commander Thorne spoke up, his voice tight with concern. "Admiral, are you sure about this? We'll be destroyed." Wrecker met his executive officer's gaze, his eyes hard and determined. "We're dead either way, Commander. But if we're going down, we're taking that Zork ship with us." He turned to Dr. Aravos. "Doctor, I need everything you've got from those new weapons. Overload them if you have to, but give me all the firepower you can muster." Dr. Aravos nodded, her fingers flying over her console. "Aye, Admiral. Rerouting power now." The Retribution surged forward, its engines straining as it accelerated towards the Zork dreadnought. Plasma fire slammed into its shields, but Wrecker ignored it, his eyes fixed on his target. "Collision in 30 seconds, the helmsman reported, his voice shaking. "All hands, brace for impact," Wrecker ordered over the shipwide comm. He gripped his armrests tighter, his heart pounding in his chest. The Zork ship grew larger and larger on the view screen, its weapons firing a blinding barrage of plasma that slammed into the Retribution's shields with devastating force. But the human ship kept coming, its own weapons firing in response. "Collision in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the helmsman cried. The world exploded in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar of sound as the Retribution slammed into the Zork ship with the force of 1,000 suns. The Retribution's reinforced hull crumpled and tore like tinfoil, but the Zork ship fared no better, its own hull shattered and splintered, spilling debris and bodies into the void. For a moment, there was nothing but chaos and destruction. Then, slowly, the Retribution emerged from the wreckage, its hull battered and scorched, its shields flickering and failing, but it was intact. The Zork ship was nothing more than a cloud of expanding debris. Wrecker slumped back in his chair, his face pale, his breathing ragged. Around him, his crew stared at the view screen in stunned disbelief, hardly daring to believe that they had survived. "Damage report," Wrecker croaked, his voice hoarse. Commander Thorne shook his head. "It's bad, Admiral. Main power is offline, shields are down, and we've got hull breaches on almost every deck. But we're alive." Wrecker nodded wearily. "And the refugee ships?" Dr. Aravos checked her console. "They made it out, Admiral. The Zork fleet is in full retreat." Wrecker closed his eyes, a wave of relief washing over him. They had done it. Against all odds, they had saved the refugees and struck a blow against the Zorks. But even as he savored this small victory, he knew that their fight was far from over. The Zorks would be back, and they would be angry. And the Retribution was badly damaged, in need of extensive repairs before it could fight again. But for now, at least they had won. And as Wrecker gave the order to set course for the human colony, he allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. The Zorks may have had superior numbers and technology, but they would never have the courage and determination of the human spirit. And with that knowledge, Wrecker knew that they would keep fighting, no matter the odds, for the sake of humanity and for the sake of the galaxy itself. As the Retribution made its way towards the colony, a figure stepped forward from the shadows, their hooded face obscured. "Admiral Wrecker," they said, their voice calm and measured. "I have urgent news from the human Imperium." Wrecker's hand dropped to the pistol at his hip, his body tensing for action. "The human Imperium is gone, destroyed centuries ago," he said, his voice hard. The figure lowered their hood, revealing a weathered face etched with lines of age and hardship. "Not destroyed, merely hidden," they said, "waiting for the right moment to strike back against our enemies." Wrecker's eyes narrowed. "And who are you?" The figure inclined their head. "I am the Prophet, and I come to you now because the time has come for humanity to reclaim its rightful place in the galaxy." Wrecker crossed his arms, his expression skeptical. "And how do you propose we do that?" "The Zorks outnumber us 1,000 to 1. The Prophet reached into their robes and produced a data crystal. With this, the key to our salvation, the Terminus device. Dr. Aravos took the crystal, her eyes widening as she scanned its contents. Is this what I think it is? The prophet nodded. A doomsday weapon capable of destroying entire star systems, created in the final days of the Imperium as a last resort against the alien threat that brought about our downfall. Wrecker's face hardened. And you want us to use it against the Orcs? The prophets spread their hands. Not us, Admiral. You. The Retribution is the only ship that stands a chance of breaking through their defenses and securing the device. Wrecker paced back and forth, his mind racing. The Terminus device could end the war in a single stroke, but the risks were enormous. If they failed, if the Orcs captured the device, the consequences would be unthinkable. He turned to Dr. Aravos. Can we trust this information? Can we trust the prophet? Dr. Aravos hesitated, then nodded slowly. I've run every test I can think of. The data is genuine, and if there's even a chance that the Terminus device exists. Wrecker took a deep breath, then squared his shoulders. All right, we'll do it, but we're going to need a plan, and a damn good one at that. The prophet smiled, a glint of triumph in their eyes. I thought you might say that, Admiral. Let us begin. As the prophet laid out the details of their audacious scheme, Wrecker knew that they were embarking on a mission that could change the course of the war. The Terminus device was the key to humanity's salvation, but the risks were beyond measure. Still, Wrecker was determined to see it through. For the sake of the human colonies, for the sake of the Imperium, and for the sake of the galaxy itself, he would do whatever it took to secure the Terminus device and turn the tide of the war against the Orcs. With the Retribution at his command and a fleet of human vessels at his back, Wrecker was ready to unleash the full might of humanity's vengeance upon the Orc Confederacy. The galaxy would tremble before the power of the Retribution, and the Orcs would learn the true meaning of human defiance.